Jason Statham walked through the busy streets of Sherbrooke on a cold winter morning in 1975. He was only 8 years old then, but already showed signs of the strong character he would become famous for later. His father Barry owned a small market stall where he sold cheap jewelry and random items to anyone who would buy them. Young Jason helped his dad every weekend, carrying boxes and learning how to talk to customers. On this particular Saturday morning, something changed Jason's life forever. Behind the old brick buildings near the market, he heard a small crying sound. It was not a human cry, but something softer and more desperate. Jason followed the sound until he found a tiny brown puppy hiding behind some old wooden crates. The puppy was shivering and looked like it had not eaten for days. Its fur was dirty and matted, and its eyes were filled with fear. Jason knelt down slowly and reached out his small hand toward the frightened animal. The puppy backed away at first, but Jason spoke to it in a gentle voice that surprised even himself. He had never been particularly gentle with anything before. Most 8-year-old boys in his neighborhood were rough and loud, but something about this helpless creature made Jason feel different inside. The puppy finally came closer and sniffed Jason's fingers. When it licked his hand with its small pink tongue, Jason felt a warmth in his chest that he had never experienced before. He carefully picked up the puppy and held it close to his jacket. The little animal stopped shivering and seemed to relax in Jason's arms. Jason knew he had to take the puppy home, but he also knew his parents would not be happy about it. His family did not have much money, and feeding another mouth would be difficult. His mother Eileen worked hard to keep their small house clean and put food on the table. His father worked long hours at the market just to pay the bills. Adding a dog to their household seemed impossible. But Jason could not leave the puppy behind. He made a decision right there on that cold street that would shape who he became as a man. He would take full responsibility for this animal, no matter what it cost him. He walked back to his father's market stall with the puppy hidden inside his jacket. When Barry Statham saw his son approaching with a suspicious bulge in his coat, he immediately knew something was wrong. Jason was not good at hiding things, and his face always gave away his secrets. Before his father could ask any questions, Jason pulled out the tiny puppy and began talking faster than he ever had in his life. He promised his father that he would take care of everything. He would use his own pocket money to buy dog food. He would clean up any messes the puppy made. He would walk it every day before and after school. He would never ask his parents for money to take care of the dog. All he wanted was permission to keep it. Barry looked at his son's determined face and saw something he had never seen before. Jason was usually a quiet boy who kept to himself, but now his eyes were bright with passion and purpose. The man realized that this moment was important for his son's character development. After talking with his wife Eileen that evening, Barry agreed to let Jason keep the puppy under one condition. Jason had to prove he could handle the responsibility for 1 full month. If he failed to take proper care of the animal, they would have to find it a new home. Jason named the puppy Buddy and treated it like his best friend. Every morning before school, he would wake up early to feed Buddy and take him for a walk around the neighborhood. After school, while other kids played football or watched television, Jason spent his time training his dog and making sure it was happy and healthy. The bond between Jason and Buddy became legendary in their small town. Neighbors would often see the boy and his dog playing in the park or walking down the street together. Jason talked to Buddy like he was a person, telling him about his day at school and sharing his dreams for the future. This early relationship with Buddy taught Jason something important about loyalty and protection that would stay with him for the rest of his life. Jason Statham stood at the edge of the 10-meter diving platform at Crystal Palace National Sports Centre. He was now 22 years old and one of England's most promising divers. His muscular body was perfectly balanced as he prepared for another practice dive. Below him, the clear blue water waited, but Jason's mind was not completely focused on his training. He kept thinking about Rex, his German shepherd, who was waiting for him back at his small apartment. Rex had replaced Buddy, who had lived a long and happy life before passing away when Jason was 18. The loss of his first dog had broken Jason's heart, but it also made him realize how important dogs were to his happiness. Within a month of losing Buddy, Jason had adopted Rex from a local shelter. The German Shepherd was already 2 years old and had been returned to the shelter 3 times by previous owners who said he was too energetic and difficult to handle. Jason saw something different in Rex. The dog was not difficult. He was just intelligent and needed someone who understood him. From their first meeting, Jason and Rex formed a bond that was even stronger than what he had shared with Buddy. Rex seemed to understand Jason's moods and would stay close when Jason felt stressed about his diving competitions. Every morning at 5:30, Jason would wake up and take Rex for a long run through the parks near his apartment. The dog's energy perfectly matched Jason's need for physical activity. They would run for miles together, with Rex keeping pace beside Jason as they moved through the quiet streets of London. Other early morning joggers began to recognize the pair and would wave as they passed by. Jason's diving coach, Tom Miller, noticed that his star athlete was often distracted during training sessions. At first, Tom thought Jason was losing interest in competitive diving. But when he followed Jason after practice one day, he discovered the real reason for the distraction. Jason would rush through the locker room, barely stopping to shower, so he could get home to Rex as quickly as possible. Tom watched from his car as Jason arrived at his apartment building and was greeted by Rex, who was waiting by the window. The dog's tail wagged so hard, his entire body moved from side to side. Jason's face lit up with a smile that Tom had never seen during diving practice. It was clear that this relationship was the most important thing in Jason's life. The other divers on the national team began to notice Jason's dedication to his dog. During training camps, Jason would call home every day to check on Rex. He had arranged for his neighbor, an elderly woman named Mrs. Peterson, to walk Rex and feed him while Jason was away. But Jason worried constantly about whether Rex was happy and healthy without him. One day during a particularly important training session, Jason received a phone call from Mrs. Peterson. She sounded worried as she explained that Rex had not eaten his breakfast and seemed sick. Without hesitation, Jason climbed down from the diving platform, grabbed his towel, and told Coach Miller he had to leave immediately. Tom was furious. This was less than 2 weeks before a major international competition, and Jason was walking away from practice because of his dog. The coach followed Jason to the parking lot and demanded an explanation. Jason calmly explained that Rex was not just a pet, he was family. If Rex was sick, nothing else mattered until Jason made sure he was okay. The argument between Jason and his coach became heated. Tom threatened to remove Jason from the competition team if he left practice early. Jason looked his coach in the eye and said that Rex's health was more important than any diving medal. He got in his car and drove home to take Rex to the veterinarian. Rex turned out to have eaten something that disagreed with him and was fine after a day of rest. But the incident marked a turning point in Jason's diving career. He realized that his heart was not completely committed to competitive sports. His real passion was caring for animals, especially dogs. Jason Statham walked through the gates of the Beverly Hills Animal Shelter on a sunny Saturday morning in 2002. His first major movie role in The Transporter had just made him famous around the world, but fame was not what brought him to this place. He was looking for a new companion after Rex had passed away from old age the previous year. The loss had left a huge hole in Jason's heart that only another dog could fill. The shelter worker, a young woman named Sarah, recognized Jason immediately but tried to act professional. She had seen his movies and knew he played tough guys who drove fast cars and fought bad people. What she did not expect was to see this famous action star getting down on his knees to pet every dog they passed, speaking to each animal in a soft, gentle voice. Jason stopped in front of a cage that held a large pit bull with scars on his face and a missing piece of his left ear. The dog's name tag read Brutus, and there was a note that said he had been at the shelter for 8 months. Most people walked past Brutus without stopping because he looked mean and scary. But Jason saw something different in the dog's eyes. He saw sadness and loneliness, feelings that Jason understood very well. Sarah warned Jason that Brutus had a reputation for being aggressive with strangers. The dog had been returned to the shelter twice by families who said he was too dangerous to keep. But when Jason sat down in front of the cage and reached his hand toward the bars, Brutus came over and gently licked his fingers. Within minutes, the supposedly dangerous dog was lying on his back asking for belly rubs. Jason knew immediately that he wanted to adopt Brutus, but the shelter had rules about adopting dogs with behavioral problems. Jason would have to prove he could handle a difficult animal and provide a safe home. The paperwork took 3 hours to complete, but Jason waited patiently while Sarah processed everything. When Jason finally brought Brutus home to his new mansion in the Hollywood Hills, the dog seemed overwhelmed by the size of the house and the large yard. For the first week, Brutus stayed close to Jason and would not explore the property on his own. Jason understood that the dog needed time to feel safe and secure in his new environment. Word spread quickly through Hollywood that Jason Statham had adopted a pit bull from a shelter. Some of his friends and colleagues thought he was crazy for taking such a risk with his career. If Brutus ever hurt someone, it could destroy Jason's reputation and cost him millions of dollars in movie deals. But Jason did not care about the potential problems. He cared about giving Brutus a second chance at happiness. 3 months after adopting Brutus, Jason decided to bring him to a movie premiere. The event was for The Italian Job, and Jason was expected to walk down the red carpet and pose for photographs. Most celebrities brought dates or family members to premieres, but Jason brought Brutus instead. The photographers and reporters were shocked when Jason stepped out of his limousine with a large pit bull on a leather leash. Brutus wore a black collar that matched Jason's tuxedo and walked calmly beside his owner as they approached the crowd of cameras. The dog seemed to understand that this was an important event and behaved perfectly as flashes went off around them. The pictures of Jason and Brutus on the red carpet appeared in magazines around the world. Entertainment reporters wrote stories about the tough guy action star who rescued dangerous dogs and brought them to fancy Hollywood events. Some people criticized Jason for bringing an aggressive breed to a public event, but many more people praised him for showing that pit bulls could be well-behaved and loving pets. This premiere marked the beginning of Jason's reputation as Hollywood's most dedicated dog rescuer. Over the next year, he adopted 3 more dogs from shelters around Los Angeles. His house became a sanctuary for animals that other people had given up on. Jason Statham stepped out of his black Range Rover outside Nobu Restaurant in West Hollywood on a quiet Tuesday evening in 2004. He was not alone. Beside him walked Charlie, his newest rescue dog, an elderly golden Labrador who moved slowly because of arthritis in his back legs. Jason had adopted Charlie from a shelter just 2 weeks earlier after learning that the 13-year-old dog had been surrendered by his previous owners, who said he was too old and expensive to care for. The restaurant was one of Jason's favorite places to eat, and the staff always welcomed his dogs. Jason believed that Charlie deserved to experience nice things during his remaining years, so he often brought the old dog to dog-friendly restaurants and cafes around the city. Charlie seemed to enjoy these outings and would wag his tail slowly as people stopped to pet him. As Jason and Charlie walked toward the restaurant entrance, 3 photographers jumped out from behind parked cars. The paparazzi had been waiting for over an hour, hoping to get pictures of Jason with his latest girlfriend, or maybe catch him doing something embarrassing. What they got instead was something much more dramatic than they expected. The photographers immediately started taking pictures, their camera flashes going off like lightning in the dark evening air. The bright white lights flashed again and again as they called out Jason's name, trying to get him to look in their direction. Jason was used to this kind of attention and normally just ignored the photographers until he got inside the restaurant. But Charlie was not used to camera flashes. The old dog had lived a quiet life before coming to Jason, spending most of his time in a backyard with his elderly previous owners. The sudden bright lights and loud voices scared him badly. Charlie pulled away from Jason and tried to run, but his leash got tangled around his legs, and he fell onto the sidewalk. Jason immediately knelt down to help Charlie get back on his feet, but the photographers kept taking pictures and the flashes kept going off. Charlie was now breathing heavily and shaking with fear. His old heart was beating so fast that Jason could feel it through the dog's chest when he picked him up. One of the photographers, a man with bleached hair and expensive camera equipment, kept moving closer and closer to get better shots. Jason stood up with Charlie in his arms and asked the man politely to stop using his flash because it was scaring his dog. The photographer laughed and said that he was on a public sidewalk and could take pictures of whatever he wanted. Jason's voice got louder as he explained that Charlie was an old dog with health problems, and the stress could seriously hurt him. The photographer ignored Jason's concerns and took more pictures, this time aiming the camera directly at Charlie's face. The bright flash went off just inches from the dog's eyes. That was when Jason's famous temper exploded. His face turned red with anger as he stepped toward the photographer, still holding Charlie protectively in his arms. Jason's voice became the same threatening tone he used in his movies as he told the man exactly what would happen if he took one more picture of his dog. The other two photographers stopped taking pictures and backed away, recognizing that Jason was truly angry and not just putting on a show. But the blonde photographer either did not understand how serious the situation was or did not care. He raised his camera again and prepared to take another shot. Jason handed Charlie to a restaurant employee who had come outside to help, then turned back to face the photographer. The confrontation that followed was recorded by security cameras and later appeared on entertainment news shows around the world. Jason did not hit the man, but his verbal attack was so intense that the photographer dropped his camera and ran to his car. From that night forward, Jason began planning his public appearances more carefully to protect his dogs from aggressive paparazzi. Jason Statham arrived at Laurel Canyon Dog Park on a beautiful Sunday afternoon in March 2006. The sun was shining through the tall trees and families were enjoying the warm weather with their pets. Jason brought Bruno, his French bulldog, who loved playing with other dogs despite his small size. Bruno was one of Jason's newer rescues, a dog who had been abandoned at a veterinary clinic when his previous owners could not afford surgery for his breathing problems. The dog park was busy that day with at least 20 dogs running around the large fenced area. Jason found a shady spot under an oak tree and sat down on one of the wooden benches. Bruno immediately ran off to explore and make friends with the other dogs. Jason watched carefully as his small dog approached a group of larger animals, ready to step in if any problems developed. For the first 30 minutes, everything went perfectly. Bruno played happily with a golden retriever puppy and chased tennis balls with several other small dogs. Jason relaxed and started reading a script for his next movie, while keeping one eye on Bruno. Other dog owners recognized Jason but left him alone, understanding that he was just trying to enjoy a quiet afternoon with his pet. Then a large German shepherd entered the park with his owner, a well-dressed businessman in expensive clothes and designer sunglasses. The man was talking loudly on his cell phone about some important business deal and was not paying attention to his dog at all. The German shepherd immediately began acting aggressively toward the smaller dogs, growling and showing his teeth whenever they came near him. Jason noticed the problem right away and called Bruno over to his side. But before Bruno could reach safety, the German shepherd charged toward him and knocked the small French bulldog to the ground. Bruno yelped in pain as the larger dog stood over him, snarling and snapping his jaws just inches from Bruno's face. Jason jumped up from the bench and ran toward the dogs, shouting at the German shepherd to back away. The businessman finally looked up from his phone call and saw what was happening, but instead of calling his dog or apologizing, he laughed and said that his dog was just playing around. Jason carefully picked up Bruno and checked him for injuries while the German shepherd continued to circle around them aggressively. Bruno was shaking with fear and had a small cut on his ear from where the other dog had nipped him. Jason's protective instincts kicked in as he turned to face the businessman. The conversation started calmly with Jason, explaining that the man needed to control his dog because it was being aggressive towards smaller animals. The businessman, who clearly did not recognize Jason as a famous actor, responded with attitude and arrogance. He said that big dogs naturally dominated little dogs, and that Jason should not bring such a small, weak animal to a public dog park. Jason's voice got louder as he pointed out that this was supposed to be a safe space for all dogs to play together. The businessman made the mistake of calling Bruno a useless little rat dog that probably cost more money than it was worth. He suggested that Jason should get a real dog instead of carrying around a toy breed like an accessory. That comment crossed a line that Jason would not tolerate. His face turned red with anger as he stepped closer to the businessman, his voice taking on the same dangerous tone that made him famous in action movies. Jason began explaining in very clear terms exactly why the man was wrong and exactly what kind of person abandons responsibility for their pet's behavior. The other dog owners in the park stopped what they were doing and gathered around to watch the confrontation. Several people started recording the argument with their phones, sensing that this was going to become a memorable incident. The businessman realized he had made a serious mistake when he saw Jason's muscular frame and heard the intensity in his voice. Jason Statham sat in the waiting room of the Animal Medical Center in New York City at 2 o'clock in the morning. His hands were shaking slightly as he held a cup of cold coffee that he had not touched in over an hour. Across from him lay Lucky, his 3-year-old mixed-breed rescue dog, connected to tubes and monitors that beeped softly in the quiet room. Lucky had collapsed during their evening walk in Central Park, and the emergency veterinarian had delivered devastating news about kidney failure. Jason had adopted Lucky from a high-kill shelter in Los Angeles 6 months earlier. The dog had been scheduled to be put down the next day when Jason arrived and fell in love with his gentle personality and intelligent eyes. Lucky was not the prettiest dog Jason had ever owned, with his uneven brown and white coat and one ear that stood up while the other flopped down. But he had the biggest heart of any animal Jason had ever met. The specialist, Dr. Sarah Chen, came into the waiting room with a thick folder of test results. She sat down next to Jason and explained that Lucky's condition was very serious but not hopeless. The dog would need immediate surgery, followed by months of expensive treatments and medications. The total cost would be somewhere between $40,000 and $60,000, with no guarantee that the treatment would work. Dr. Chen had seen many pet owners face this difficult decision before. Most people, even wealthy ones, chose to put their animals to sleep rather than spend so much money on uncertain medical care. She expected Jason to ask for time to think about it, or to discuss it with his family. Instead, Jason looked her in the eye and said 3 simple words that surprised her completely. Do everything possible. Jason did not ask about the cost again or request a payment plan. He handed Dr. Chen his credit card and signed every form she put in front of him. The surgery took place that same night, with Jason sleeping in the waiting room chair until the operation was finished. When Dr. Chen came out 6 hours later to tell him that Lucky had survived the procedure, Jason actually started crying with relief. The next 3 months became a blur of specialist appointments, medication schedules, and daily trips to various veterinary clinics around Los Angeles. Jason hired a full-time veterinary assistant named Maria to help manage Lucky's care while he was working on movie sets. His house was transformed into something that looked more like a medical facility than a home, with special equipment and supplies taking up entire rooms. Jason's friends and family members began to worry about his obsession with Lucky's health. His girlfriend at the time, Kelly Brooke, complained that Jason spent more money on his dog's medical care than most people earned in a year. She pointed out that he was turning down lucrative movie roles because he did not want to travel far from Lucky during the recovery period. The situation became even more complicated when Jason's neighbor, a retired lawyer named Robert Harrison, filed a complaint with the city about the noise coming from Jason's property. The medical equipment, combined with Lucky's overnight whimpering during his recovery, had been disturbing the peace in the quiet Beverly Hills neighborhood. Jason tried to resolve the issue diplomatically by installing soundproofing and moving Lucky's recovery room to the back of the house. But Harrison was not satisfied with these compromises. He filed additional complaints about the number of vehicles coming and going from Jason's property, claiming that the veterinary assistants and specialists were treating the residential area like a commercial medical facility. The conflict escalated when Harrison hired a private investigator to document what he called Jason's illegal operation of an animal hospital without proper permits. Jason responded by hiring his own lawyers, not to defend himself, but to ensure that Lucky's medical care could continue without interruption. The legal battle lasted 4 months and cost Jason over $200,000 in attorney fees. Jason Statham walked through the crowded animal shelter in downtown Los Angeles on a rainy Saturday morning in 2008. The smell of disinfectant mixed with wet dog fur filled the air as he followed Linda Martinez, the shelter director, past rows of cages filled with abandoned animals. This was not Jason's first visit to this particular shelter, but today was different. Today he was here as more than just someone looking to adopt another rescue dog. Linda had called Jason 3 days earlier with an unusual request. The shelter was facing a crisis that threatened to shut down their operations permanently. The city had cut their funding by 60%, and they needed to raise $200,000 within 30 days, or they would be forced to close. Linda knew about Jason's reputation for rescuing difficult dogs, and she hoped he might be willing to help save the entire shelter. As they walked through the facility, Jason saw the problem clearly. The building was old and falling apart, with leaking roofs and broken heating systems. Many of the dog cages were too small and overcrowded. The staff was working with outdated equipment and not enough supplies to properly care for all the animals. Despite these challenges, Jason could see that everyone who worked there truly cared about the animals and was doing their best with limited resources. Linda stopped in front of a large cage that held 6 puppies who had been found abandoned in a cardboard box behind a fast food restaurant. The puppies were only 8 weeks old and would need expensive medical care and vaccinations before they could be adopted. Under the current budget crisis, the shelter could not afford to provide this care, which meant the puppies would have to be put to sleep. Jason knelt down and let the puppies lick his fingers through the cage bars. Their tiny tails wagged frantically as they competed for his attention. These innocent animals had done nothing wrong, but they would die simply because humans had failed to provide adequate funding for their care. Jason felt a familiar anger building in his chest, but this time it was directed at a system that allowed shelters to fail rather than at any individual person. That afternoon, Jason wrote a check for the full $200,000 needed to keep the shelter open. But he did not stop there. He also committed to providing ongoing monthly support and agreed to become the shelter's official celebrity spokesperson. Within a week, Jason was appearing in television commercials and print advertisements, asking other people to support animal rescue organizations. The response to Jason's involvement was immediate and overwhelming. Donations poured in from fans around the world who had never thought about supporting animal shelters before. Other celebrities began following Jason's example, and soon there was a whole movement of famous people promoting animal welfare causes. Jason's girlfriend at the time, Rosie Huntington Whiteley, initially supported his charitable work, but began to worry when it started taking over their personal life. Every weekend, Jason would spend entire days visiting different shelters around Southern California. He would come home with detailed stories about dogs he had met and plans for helping specific animals that needed medical care or special attention. Their house began to look like a professional animal rescue facility rather than a home. Jason had converted 3 bedrooms into spaces for foster dogs who were recovering from surgery or waiting for permanent homes. There were special feeding schedules posted on the refrigerator, multiple dog beds in every room, and a full-time veterinary assistant who came to the house twice a week to check on all the animals. Rosie counted 17 different dogs living in their house at one point, each with their own story of how Jason had intervened to save their lives. Some were permanent residents, while others were temporary guests who would eventually be adopted by other families. The noise level was incredible, with barking, playing, and general chaos happening at all hours of the day and night. Jason's friends joked that he was running a luxury dog hotel rather than maintaining a normal household. Jason Statham walked into Paws and Claw's luxury pet store on Rodeo Drive on a busy Thursday afternoon in September 2010. He was looking for a special collar for Daisy, his newest rescue dog who had just recovered from surgery to repair her broken leg. The store was known for having the most expensive and exclusive pet accessories in Beverly Hills, but Jason did not mind paying high prices if it meant getting quality products for his dogs. The store was crowded with wealthy pet owners and their perfectly groomed animals. Jason noticed several small dogs wearing diamond-studded collars that probably cost more than most people's cars. He felt a bit out of place in his simple jeans and shirt, but he was used to being underdressed in fancy Beverly Hills establishments. Jason was examining a soft leather collar when he heard a sharp voice coming from the grooming area at the back of the store. A young employee was struggling with a small golden retriever puppy who seemed scared and was trying to hide under a grooming table. The employee, a thin man with bleached hair, was pulling roughly on the puppy's leash and speaking harshly to the frightened animal. At first, Jason tried to ignore the situation and focus on his shopping, but the employee's voice kept getting louder and more frustrated. Jason could hear him calling the puppy stupid and worthless for not cooperating with the grooming process. The puppy was whimpering and shaking with fear, but the employee showed no sympathy or patience. Jason walked closer to the grooming area and saw the employee yank the puppy's leash so hard that the small dog was lifted off the ground for a moment. The puppy yelped in pain and tried to run away, but the employee held the leash tight and dragged the animal back to the grooming table. Other customers in the store seemed to notice what was happening, but no one said anything or tried to intervene. Jason felt his face getting hot with anger as he watched the employee grab the puppy by the scruff of its neck and force it onto the grooming table. The young man was clearly frustrated and was taking out his bad mood on an innocent animal who was just scared and confused. Jason had seen enough cruelty in animal shelters to recognize the signs of someone who should not be working with animals. Jason approached the grooming area and spoke in a calm but firm voice, asking the employee to be more gentle with the puppy. The young man looked up with an annoyed expression and said that he knew how to do his job and did not need advice from customers. He explained that some dogs were just difficult and needed to be handled firmly to teach them proper behavior. Jason suggested that maybe the puppy was scared because it was young and inexperienced with grooming, and that patience and kindness would work better than force and harsh words. The employee laughed and said that Jason obviously did not understand how professional dog grooming worked. He claimed that tough love was the only way to train animals to behave properly. The situation escalated quickly when the employee gave the puppy's leash another hard jerk to prove his point. The puppy fell off the grooming table and hung in the air for several seconds, supported only by the collar around its neck. Jason could see that the animal was choking and struggling to breathe, while the employee seemed completely unconcerned about the puppy's distress. That was the moment when Jason's famous temper exploded in a way that shocked everyone in the store. His voice became the same threatening tone that made him famous in action movies as he stepped toward the employee with his fists clenched at his sides. Jason began delivering a passionate speech about animal treatment that would be remembered by everyone who witnessed it. Other customers immediately started recording the confrontation with their phones, sensing that they were about to see something extraordinary. Jason Statham stood on the back patio of his sprawling Hollywood Hills mansion on a peaceful Sunday morning in 2024. The sun was just rising over the mountains, casting a golden glow across his enormous backyard, where 8 rescue dogs of different sizes and breeds were playing together like a happy family. At 57 years old, Jason had gray streaks in his hair and laugh lines around his eyes, but his passion for protecting animals burned as strong as ever. The dogs surrounding him told the story of his journey from action star to animal advocate. There was Bruno, now an elderly French bulldog who moved slowly but still demanded belly rubs every morning. Crusher, the pit bull he had rescued 15 years earlier, lay in a sunny spot near the pool with his gray muzzle resting on his paws. 3 newer additions, all senior dogs that other people had given up on, wandered around the yard investigating interesting smells and chasing butterflies. Jason's wife, Rosie Huntington Whiteley, emerged from the house carrying 2 cups of coffee and shaking her head with amused affection. After years of marriage, she had learned to accept that their home would always be more like an animal sanctuary than a typical celebrity residence. She had watched Jason transform from a tough guy actor who happened to love dogs into one of the most respected animal welfare advocates in the world. The transformation had not happened overnight. After the viral video of Jason's confrontation at the pet store spread across social media in 2010, he received thousands of messages from people sharing their own stories of animal abuse and neglect. Many of these messages broke Jason's heart, but they also inspired him to do more than just rescue individual dogs. He realized that his fame and fortune gave him the power to create lasting change in how society treated animals. In 2012, Jason established the Statham Foundation for Animal Welfare, a nonprofit organization that provided emergency veterinary care for abandoned and abused animals. The foundation operated mobile veterinary clinics that visited low-income neighborhoods where pet owners could not afford proper medical care for their animals. Jason personally funded the first 5 clinics and recruited other celebrities to sponsor additional units. The foundation also lobbied for stronger animal protection laws and worked with police departments to improve their response to animal cruelty cases. Jason used his action hero image to create public service announcements that showed him rescuing dogs from dangerous situations, sending a clear message that protecting animals was a heroic act that required courage and strength. By 2020, the Statham Foundation had grown into one of the largest animal welfare organizations in the United States. The foundation operated 20 mobile veterinary clinics, funded 3 permanent animal hospitals, and had helped pass legislation in 12 states that increased penalties for animal abuse. Jason's annual fundraising galas attracted Hollywood's biggest stars and raised millions of dollars for animal rescue programs. Jason's influence extended far beyond his own foundation. Other celebrities began following his example, using their fame and resources to support animal welfare causes. The trend of bringing rescue dogs to red carpet events, which Jason had started accidentally in 2002, became a powerful way for stars to promote animal adoption. Shelter dogs that appeared at premieres and award shows often received hundreds of adoption applications within days. The most meaningful part of Jason's legacy was not the money he had raised or the laws he had helped change, but the thousands of individual animals whose lives he had saved. Every dog sleeping peacefully in his backyard represented a success story, an animal that had been given a second chance at happiness because Jason refused to look the other way when he saw suffering. As Jason sat down next to Rosie and watched his dogs enjoy their morning playtime, he reflected on how different his life had become from what he originally planned. He was still making action movies and still known for playing tough guys, but now his real-life heroism meant more to him than any character he had portrayed on screen.